Gloucestershire Domestic Abuse Support Service, known as GDASS, is there to support anyone experiencing abuse in what should be the safest of relationships and environments. It's there for the 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men whose lives are touched by abuse. So what is domestic abuse? Let's start with a definition. So this is about a person who is in a relationship or has been in a relationship, or it's about a family member. So let's look at how this abuse might manifest. So starting with physical abuse, the most visual of the categories of abuse, any gripping, grabbing, slapping, punching, hitting, kicking, anything like that. It might leave a mark, and if it has left a mark, we should get those recorded in any medical notes. Next, we'll look at emotional abuse. That is, any words or actions that undermine the victim's self-confidence. So, repeated name calling, such as saying somebody's fat, time and time again. And this could extend to saying that the victim is so ugly that only the perpetrator could put up with them because they're not good enough for anyone else. Next, we look at psychological abuse. Sometimes this is called gaslighting. This is the words and actions that undermine the victim's mental health, making them question their own sense of reality. Some of the perpetrating tricks include cancelling or changing appointments, losing the victim's keys or purse or wallet, anything that makes the victim unsure, less confident. One of the usual things is to then underplay or minimise or deny other forms of abuse. It's all in the victim's mind. Sexual abuse is about getting somebody to do something that they wouldn't choose to do. So examples of that are having pictures taken which could later be used to threaten or blackmail, or getting somebody to do something which degrades, makes them feel bad. Ultimately, rape is a demonstration of power and control. Financial abuse is either getting somebody to work so that they're then tired and don't have the energy to do other things, or taking away their work so that they don't have the financial independence which would give them means to make a change in their life. Sometimes that could include burdening them with loans and other debt so that they have no other means of getting this paid, so they're tied to the perpetrator. All of these forms of abuse are about power and control within a relationship.
Absolutely anybody can experience domestic abuse. It doesn't matter about gender, race, ethnic or religious group, sexuality, class or disability. We do know, however, that people who have a disability, problem with substance misuse, mental health difficulties, homelessness, or in the LGBT community are at an increased risk of being exposed to or experiencing domestic abuse, and may find it also harder to actually access support as well.
There are a number of ways that a victim might present, and there are a number of things that we as professionals can look out for. So for instance, physical indicators might be the most obvious, I suppose, are physical injuries. So broken bones, bruising, burns, anything repeated, are service users presenting with the same injuries time and time again. Also, does the injury match the story? So, or do you feel like there's a discrepancy between what the service user is telling you and how they got the injury and the injury themselves? Does it make sense, or are there further questions to be asked? Any problems within pregnancy, so any stress-related problems, could that be down to experiencing some kind of abuse at home? And any other physical manifestations of stress, so for instance, repeated and consistent headaches or IBS, lack of appetite, insomnia, weight loss, anything that could be, as I said, a physical manifestation of stress. Obviously, not everybody displaying or presenting these symptoms are going to be experiencing abuse at home, but it's definitely worth asking those questions. Behavioural indicators may include a reluctance to speak in front of a partner or a family member, being unusually submissive or afraid to speak. The family member or partner might be aggressive towards the service user, they might be aggressive towards you, they might be dominant, they might be trying to talk for the service user, jump in when they think they feel the need to answer for the service user, or speak over the top of the service user, and become quite dominant in that way. They might attend appointments with the service user unnecessarily, so that where there isn't usually a need for somebody to accompany the service user, they might come along anyway. They may refuse to leave the room when you ask them to. The service user may be a frequent attender for seemingly minor things that you can't quite put your finger on, or they might frequently miss appointments, and this may be because they are being encouraged to not attend appointments, or actually physically stopped from attending appointments. And they may also be non-compliant to an agreed plan, so something that you may have agreed on previously, they may all of a sudden change their behaviour or their attitude to this and perhaps be non-compliant. Emotional indicators might include an effect on the service user's mental health. So they might be talking about feeling more depressed than usual, or feeling more anxious than usual. And of course, they might present as being low or anxious or depressed or in a state of panic. Very often service users or victims of abuse will describe feeling as though they're walking on eggshells constantly because of the fear of repercussion or what they're going to experience next. And so they feel like they're walking on eggshells around their perpetrator. And so this can manifest in feeling depressed or anxious or in a state of panic quite regularly throughout the day. They might be talking about suicidal thoughts, or may even be attempting to plan suicide, or talking about it more frequently than usual, perhaps. They might be talking about feelings of dependency, so perhaps all of a sudden they feel like they can't manage without the perpetrator, because that's what the perpetrator has made them feel and believe. So perhaps they're talking about not being able to move away or live independently because they feel so controlled and so dependent upon the perpetrator. They may appear just low. Very often abuse or a perpetrator will erode a victim of their self-worth, their self-confidence, and their feelings of self-confidence. And so very often a service user will present as this. You could tell visibly that someone is lacking in self-confidence or self-worth. They may be talking about or presenting with a lack of hope, so not being able to see anything in the future, or worried about the future perhaps. Maybe they're describing feelings of isolation, so they haven't seen anybody for a while or haven't spoken to anybody in a while, people that are important to them. So there are a number of ways, if a service user is being controlled by a partner or ex-partner, there are a number of ways that this might present itself to us as professionals, and there are a number of things that we could be looking out for. So for instance, if a service user was previously engaging well with our service and our support, and then all of a sudden changes their mind around the support and perhaps starts disengaging or becoming non-compliant, I would be asking questions around why this is. Is the service user frequently missing appointments? So is there somebody at home stopping them from reaching out to services? Are they reporting a limited access to money for basic things such as food or transport or basic needs? So are they unable to get to appointments, or are they unable to get to the shops for food? And why is this? Is there somebody controlling their finances or physically stopping them from going out? Are they trying to hide injuries or physical signs of abuse? And are they minimising abuse? So are they telling you that yes, something did happen, but actually it wasn't as bad as perhaps it sounds, or it was only the once, and so that it doesn't matter, it was a one-off and they can move on from it? Are they minimising it? And how about the behaviour when they're with you? So are they anxious about the time perhaps that the appointment is taking? Are they worried that somebody is waiting for them and they need to rush off? Are they constantly checking their phone or having to answer messages? So are they being put under pressure to respond to messages that they receive immediately within your appointment? And are they expressing, or do they start to express opinions that are unusual for them? So if you know the service user and you know how they usually operate, do they start talking about things or expressing opinions that aren't within their usual character? And is there somebody outside putting pressure on them to change their mind about something or express a differing opinion about something? It's really important to note that very often a service user or a victim of abuse won't just outwardly say that they are being abused. Very often, especially if it's subtle coercive control, very often a victim won't realise that they are being abused at the time. It often takes some time and some reflection to realise that the abuse is happening, or perhaps an outside party talking to them about it to have that light bulb moment and realise that actually something is happening. So as a professional, it's really, really important to listen to what the service user is trying to tell you. So they might not be saying it explicitly, but it's really important that we read between the lines. What are they trying to tell us without actually saying it explicitly?
The current lockdown situation and people being at home rather than at work and not really being able to get out is likely to have made things harder for those victims living with the perpetrators. They are likely to be more isolated and have less access to support networks that were perhaps available before, and they may be spending prolonged periods of time with the perpetrator, so they may be exposed to longer periods of domestic abuse. The risk of and intensity of that abuse may also increase during that time. So we know that things that increase risk are things like financial difficulty or loss of job or sort of dramatic changes in life circumstances. And I think a lot of people have experienced that with the current situation that's going on. So most of us are having to work quite differently at the moment with our service users as a result of the lockdown. It may be that some services are still available for service users to attend the service, and others perhaps we're having to contact via phone or via video call or email instead. And other people, it might be that are being visited in the community at their homes and seen in that setting rather than in a service, which means that perhaps there are other people around and in the background that wouldn't normally be there. This can make it more difficult to have an opportunity to speak to people about domestic abuse. We'll talk a little bit about sort of some of the signs that you can look for and ways of approaching people to talk about domestic abuse safely just now. If your service is still open for service users to attend, one of the first ways that you can support them is by advertising that you're actually a safe space to talk about domestic abuse, that you are aware of domestic abuse and that you're there for people to approach and disclose any kind of abuse to. One way that you can do this is by advertising it through posters, and there are posters available on our GDASS website. The details of the website will be available at the end of this video. Another way that you can do it is actually trying to spend some time with service users on their own. So try and get just even a couple of minutes alone with the service user, away from perhaps a suspected perpetrator or their partner or friends or family, just so that you then have the opportunity to perhaps ask them some very simple questions, just checking in with them and seeing if they feel safe. So you can maybe ask them how things are at home. Are they feeling safe? Is anybody hurting them? Or are they afraid of anybody at home? And if so, would they like some support with that?
Are you contacting your patient by a video call, maybe Skype or WhatsApp videos? In which case you can gather far more information about the patient. Starting before the call, does the patient miss calls, miss appointments, or appear flustered, uncomfortable speaking? Is there anyone else present, either in shot or out of shot? You can either hear their voice or the patient is checking to make sure they're giving the correct answers or it's safe to answer. Those little target glances. Then you're starting to look at the patient. Any visual marks or bruising? Do they appear more dishevelled than previously? Do they feel at ease speaking to you, or do they feel nervous or uncomfortable? Then looking around and thinking about the house. Is there any signs of damage to the walls or the furniture? Does the house look more dishevelled than before? Then thinking about the patient. Do they sound as though they're taking charge of their lives, or does it sound as though somebody else is controlling when they can make calls or when they can't? Do they feel at ease talking about calls they've made to family and friends, or do they look uncomfortable about talking about things like that somebody else may be imposing a routine or preventing contact?
If you're still able to see people in person, there are a number of things that you could be doing to check in on their safety. So are you able to actually see them in person? If you knock on the door, do they answer? Are they willing to come and speak to you? Or does somebody else answer? Is somebody perhaps blocking them from coming to see you? How does the service user present? So are they particularly anxious or more scared than usual? Or are they hurt even? Obviously, there's only so much you can do when socially distancing, but you can still kind of get a feel for how the household is. So is it particularly chaotic? Is it noisy? Can you hear things that worry you? Or is it calm and seems kind of safe and okay? Again, can you look out for any damage to the property? So any holes in walls or doors, broken furniture? Can you spot any visible injuries on the service user? If you can do so safely and away from other people, ask the service user how they are. So ask them if they feel safe, ask them if they're worried about anything or anybody, ask them if anybody is hurting them or if they are afraid to stay at home and if they need help. Let them know that you are there if they need to contact you and that you can put them in contact with specialist services if they need them. Also, perhaps ask them if it would be better or safer for them to have a phone call. So perhaps greeting them on the doorstep isn't the safest option, or having a Skype call with them isn't the safest option. Perhaps a phone call would suit them better. So tailor your support to what the service user needs and what is most safe for them. It's really, really important to note that it's vital that you speak to the service user alone. Never speak to the service user in front of the perpetrator, especially if you're asking them if they feel safe or if they're worried about anything. And this includes in writing. So if you're writing to the service user, be aware that actually what you put in that letter might be seen by other members of the household and could increase the risk to the service user.
So how you respond to somebody's disclosure about domestic abuse is really important. We know that a barrier to people opening up and talking about their abuse is often their fear of how people will respond to a disclosure. So if you can let people know that you're thankful for them sharing that with you, letting them know that it's not okay what they're going through, and letting them know that there is also support available for them through your service, but also through GDASS. It's a great way to support somebody when they make a disclosure. Also, making sure that that person has control over what happens next as much as possible. So asking them, what would you like to happen next? It may be that they're not ready to leave the perpetrator or to make any decision that moment, but just knowing that they have somebody they can talk to can be really, really helpful, and feeling empowered to know that they have a choice over what they want to do now is also really valuable. If you would like to make a referral or an inquiry, this can be made via the GDASS website at www.gdass.org.uk. If you have any concerns that somebody may be at immediate risk of harm or in immediate danger of harm or injury or death, please contact the police on 999 and report your concerns.